What is up, everybody? We decided to absolutely crash your Sunday with some big monster news. More monster news because it's been a week of big-time news. Matt Milano resigns on Thursday. Darrell Williams resigns on Friday. And now, as you heard from Syracuse.com, getting in the breaking news business here, Jon Feliciano, 3 years, $17 million. He will be back with the Buffalo Bills through the 2023 season. This is the Shout Buffalo Bills Football Podcast. I am Matt Parrino, joined as always by my main man, Ryan Talbot. And boy, we got to break this thing down, Ryan. I don't think anybody with a straight face would have said Monday, Brandon Beane will re-sign Milano, Williams, and Feliciano. But it's done heading into free agency tampering period starting tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely insane to re-sign all three of your key free agents, your top three. So fantastic job by Brandon Beane before the start of the legal tampering window, especially because during that time, players might be blown away with an offer, and then all of a sudden the Bills could have lost one of these players. So Buffalo's GM clearly knows what it's doing, and nothing better than on a Sunday, a Matt Parrino bomb just coming out of nowhere. Parrino off the top rope, whatever you want to call it. Love the breaking news. Glad to see that the Bills are pretty much running it back when it comes to their key free agents.
Let's start with what it means that he's back in the mix because, I went on Nate Geary's show on WGR 550, obviously friend of the program. We have him on quite a bit here over the course of the season and off season. And we were just talking about, the potential of Feliciano coming back. And I think, as late as Saturday when I talked to him, it didn't look great. I mean, just the sheer numbers of it, the money that was spent, we know that it's going to be an $8 million cap hit for Matt Milano this year. Still kind of working through what the numbers are going to look like for Darrell Williams. He signed at about $9.2 million per season, but that cap hit this year, is that out yet, actually? Did somebody report that?
The cap I'm not sure. I don't know if there wasn't a complete breakdown necessarily.
Gotcha. So keep an eye out for that. But now Feliciano, 3 years, $17 million. Coming in, a little bit more than the Quentin Spain deal, which I think that is obviously very, team friendly because of the versatility that Jon Feliciano, that, who has proven to be an every game starter at this point in his career, to come back on that kind of deal and to be able to fit all of this into the equation, I think is huge. But what I was talking about with Nate about what the Bills potentially could lose if Jon Feliciano wasn't brought back into the mix. And sure, could you find another person to play guard, or, Ryan Bates can play tackle and center. You could have a backup center. Sure, of course. But everybody that you talk to in that building, whether it be Bobby Johnson, Brian Dable, Josh Allen, when you talk to them about what Jon Feliciano has meant to this team, Deion Dawkins joked around last year and was like, man, this dude is such a savage, and he brings that to the line. That's important. This has got to be the most nasty unit on your football team. You have to win at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's one of the big reasons why this Bills offense, despite being without John Brown in the second half of the season, were able to maintain a level of play and continue to ascend. And were there issues? Sure. Of course there were issues. But let's not forget, Jon Feliciano suffered 2 injuries back-to-back. He had the injury that he rehabbed all offseason, the shoulder injury, and then he tore a pec in training camp right before training camp. This dude was dealing with a lot. Coming back, he played 9 games, and I don't think he'd probably tell you that it was never exactly what he wanted it to be. But I think over those, 12 games this season, 17 last year, he's proven to be a vital part of what they want to do. And I think that shows by the fact that they were willing to spend to bring him back along with Williams and Milano.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of it already. He brings that physicality to the offensive line. He's the one that was clapping every time the Bills actually ran the ball because he wanted to see them run more. He brings the juice, so to speak. He has a great relationship with Josh Allen. That's huge. When he suffered this second injury, it was Josh Allen in a video taking care of him shortly thereafter. I can go on and on. How about the versatility, which you mentioned, the ability to seamlessly move from guard to center? As much as I like Mitch Morse, as great as I think he is, he's missed some time early here in his Bills tenure. Obviously, in his first year here, it was in the offseason he suffered that concussion. But last year he missed some time, and Feliciano was able to move along right into that spot. No drop-off, significant drop-off in play. So There's so many reasons to bring a player like this back. Someone that bought in, someone that knows the system, someone that has played under Bobby Johnson even before coming to Buffalo. It's good for the locker room. It's good for the team chemistry. It just makes too much sense.
Great question in the comments on YouTube, Rosie0216. Do you feel the Bills are just running it back? How is the team going to improve further? And that's an interesting part of the conversation here. I think let's start with the offensive line, because let's call it what it is. The most important thing this offseason, like it has been the last 2-3 off seasons, is making sure that Josh Allen is insulated. Josh Allen is protected, that the Bills put him in the best situation to be successful. And having reliable depth on that offensive line is important. And sure, could you have, we were talking about it all the last week. Could you go into next season with, maybe trying to re-sign an Ike Bucker, and obviously the expectation you have for Cody Ford after they signed Darrell Williams, that basically shows you that they're going to roll with the idea that Cody Ford is going to be a guard long-term here. But you have to have options in this league, Ryan. We've seen it. You mentioned Mitch Morse. You mentioned like the injuries that have happened on this offensive line. Darrell Williams, what happens if he goes down next year and you don't bring back a Jon Feliciano and you have a Ryan Bates and a Cody Ford, and maybe you got to flip Cody Ford back outside or maybe try Bates? It's a gamble. And I think that what you do here by bringing back Feliciano and Williams is you don't gamble as much, and you bank on the fact that, or rely on the fact that your coaching staff can continue to develop a lot of the talent that I think you're relying on from these past couple drafts.
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer Rosie's question, I can't understate the importance of continuity. You're bringing back this offensive line that you believe in, and obviously Cody Ford likely to play at that left guard spot, which he obviously missed a lot of time with an injury this year. But having your key starters back, and not just there, even on the defensive line with the restructure or the cap, the cap hit or lowering for Mario Addison and Vernon Butler, those guys wanting to come back. I know that side of the ball is a little underwhelming, but now it's going to be year 2. They're going to have a true offseason. Continuity on both sides of the ball is important. So it's not just running it back. You get better by bringing back the same pieces. It's why the secondary, year in, year out, has played well, because you've had Hyde, you've had Poyer, you've had Trey White, and it hasn't really mattered who's been that cornerback number 2, because you have that continuity, you have that base. At linebacker, you have Edmonds, you have Milano. You have the continuity there. So you're going to have the same on offense with most of your key pieces back there, obviously minus John Brown. This is a good thing. They can still be active in free agency, obviously not going for any of those premier guys, most likely based on the cap space, but the Bills can still make moves internally to free up cap space. You can get some guys to 1-year deals to kind of bolster up that depth, that talent. And you kind of decide, how can they beat the Chiefs? Well, a team like the Chiefs are going to go into next season with new left tackle, new right tackle. They let them both go because of injuries, because of everything else. Who's to say that whoever they bring in is going to be better than what they had? They might make a big signing with that money that Patrick Mahomes freed up, but that doesn't mean that replacement is going to be better than what they had. So every team around the league is going to be scrambling this offseason to improve their roster based on the new salary cap and things like that, unless you're one of those bottom tier rosters like Jacksonville. I know New England has a lot of money, but they still they have a lot of holes on that roster. The Bills are on the same boat as every other team, but continuity is the key, and they're going to have that continuity on both sides of the ball.
One thing that's really important that we've been highlighting, over the last couple of weeks, but I think that as we move forward in free agency, it's going to become even more clear as we've seen, some little reports trickle out the last couple of days. A lot of good players are going to be looking for low money 1-year deals because they want to enter free agency again next year. So you think about that. If you're Brandon Beane sitting back and be like, okay, I know I want these players that we're familiar with back in the mix long term. Well, maybe some of the, the idea of bringing in a player for a 1-year situation like a Carlos Dunlap or a Xavier Rhodes, who, we mentioned several times, you might have more of a chance to get something like that done in this offseason, where players are kind of going into next week knowing, hey, there's probably not going to be a huge market. I'm reserved to the fact that I'm probably going to get less than I thought I was going to get. I mean, we see that crazy stuff going on all over the league, Ryan. I mean, even earlier today, Shaq Lawson, 1 year, not even 1 year after signing with the Miami Dolphins, they trade him to get a little cap relief and some more cap flexibility, I believe, if they want it. I believe they can move on from McKinney if they want to this year or next year. Shaq Lawson had a little bit more dead money, especially this season. Teams are they already moved on from Kyle Van Noy, who, you know, was one of the top free agent signings last year. So teams are like trying to get under, and even the teams that end up getting under by tomorrow, the collection of teams that have money to spend, real money to spend to go after top tier free agents, it's a very small bucket. And if you're a top free agent and you're sitting there, I want to win, I want to go to a decent team. Well, most of those teams don't have those dollars anyway. So you're going to see, I think, an eye-popping amount of talented players wind up with, you know, teams that can offer a chance to win and give them that 1 year window.
I'm so glad you said that. Look back at the Dolphins offseason. They were the biggest spenders last year, and looking back on it, it was pretty much a disaster. Van Noy, gone. Shaq Lawson, traded. Jordan Howard, gone. Matt Breida, most likely gone. They spent all this money, and there's not much to show for it. So there's something to be said about Brandon Beane re-signing his own players, knowing what you have in those players, knowing how they fit, rather than going out and taking a risk on someone that you think, okay, well, maybe they can come in and play that same type of role, or they could be better. You don't know. You're just kind of throwing money out there and hoping for good results, but you know what you have in these three players, especially in the most recent signing, Feliciano, who's been here for a few seasons. You know how this offensive line has performed. You know this offense is very pass happy, and he's good in that role. So it just makes sense to bring back players like this rather than go out, try to spend that big money and hope for results. Now, when it comes to signing these players to 1 year deals, it's little risk, high reward. The Bills could find that wide receiver component, that edge rusher component, maybe another guard, maybe a cornerback number 2. They are going to have options. They're probably going to sit back early in free agency and let some of these teams with high, you know, the Jets, the Jaguars, the Patriots, among them, kind of spend that crazy money on it, a few players here and there. But Brandon Beane's going to pounce when the time is right, and he's going to bring in players that he thinks could help this team take that next step from AFC Championship game to let's go to the Super Bowl.
One more thing I want to bring up right now, and I would have loved to have brought him on, you know, real quick. Shout out to Greg Tomset, who literally called on the money the Darrell Williams deal. He predicted it back in early February. It was like, you know, to the point where he predicted the first year, you know, cap hit, or the first year number. I forget the exact language of the prediction on his show. But we had him on during the free agency money preview that we did, and he's always on the money. I would have loved to have him come on here and really give you an idea of a tweet that he had. I'm trying to find it real quick. I don't know if you saw it, Ryan, where he played with the SpotTrack.com.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
the salary cap machine that he has over on the website, and basically highlighted a bunch of different moves that the Bills still could make to free up, you know, cap room. And, you know, you start with a guy like Jerry Hughes. I know that Mike Giannetti from SpotTrack wasn't, you know, a huge fan of a move like that because of, you know, what it might mean or what it might indicate. But I think if you still believe in Jerry Hughes and you think you got two more years left, and you know you want him for 21 and you want him for 22, maybe you give him a 1 year extension, push some of that money off, give him a signing bonus this year, frees up a little bit of money, give Stephon Diggs an extension and a raise. You know, right now, I believe it was Greg that wrote, or maybe I heard him on a podcast say that he's the 16th highest receiver paid in the league right now. That's got to change. I mean, he had the best statistical season of any wide receiver last year, so you probably want to give him a pay raise as well. And it all doesn't have to happen Monday or Tuesday, Ryan. That's, I think, the biggest point that fans have to understand. I think the teams that end up winning during the tampering period and on the first day of free agency, I don't think you want to be in that bucket. I think you want to be in that shrewd secondary market where maybe some higher end players are waiting to kind of see what the the forecast looks like before they sign on the dotted line. And by then you can kind of tinker around with some things and make some moves and maybe free up some more space to bring in a real impact one or two. And I think at this point, with what they've done on the offensive line, you're probably looking at edge rusher, cornerback, and tight end as those positions where you really want to see them make one more addition. I'm a big fan of Dane Jackson. We've talked about this, right? Over the course of the season, what we saw him do. But I do think it's a little bit nerve-wracking going into next season, even if you bring back Levi Wallace, to put the expectations on him for him to be the guy. No competition, no doubt about it. I think that's a little bit worrisome, but I think that position's pretty good. I think edge rusher and tight end is probably where I have my most concerns as we sit here before tomorrow entering free agency.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I did find Greg's tweet. So releasing Lee Smith, I think that's something that is going to happen one way or the other. Lee Smith has been talking about retirement. He talked about team-friendly extensions for Jerry Hughes and Tyler Matakevich. Matakevich is another guy that you could release and save a little over $3 million if you wanted to go the other route with that. Signing Diggs to an extension where you can move some of that salary cap around and lower his cap hit for this season. You could extend someone like a Cole Beasley. That was not in Greg's tweet here, but you could do that same thing with Cole Beasley. Your all-pro receiver, someone that's coming off of his best year. Reward him, lower his cap hit. He mentions restructuring Deion Dawkins and Trey White as well and freeing up almost over $30 million in cap space. Now, will the Bills do all those moves? No, absolutely not. But could they do some of them? Yes. And when it comes to restructuring your Deion Dawkins, your Trey Whites, those are guys that you feel comfortable with knowing, hey, they're going to be here long-term. They're going to play out their contract. So we don't worry about moving some money around. We believe in them as our number one cornerback and our star left tackle. They will play out the contract. It's not something like we're throwing money away down the road. They're going to be here long term.
Indeed. Matt Parrino, Ryan Talbot, live with you on this Sunday evening. Big news. If you're just joining us, Jon Feliciano is back in a Buffalo Bills uniform for the next 3 seasons. And I see a comment here about not sold on Mongo. I want to get into that a little bit in terms of his play. 3 years, $17 million. And if you look back, last offseason, Quentin Spain signed back for 3 years at $15 million. And, obviously we know what transpired with him over the course of this last season. That didn't necessarily work out, but I think this is a very team-friendly deal. Feliciano's market value evaluated by Spottrack.com was about $8 million. The Bills are getting him back for about a little bit less than $6 million. So wow, Ryan. That's a huge coup for Brandon Beane. But let's dive into Jon Feliciano's play a little bit. And I think that he kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap. I don't know if it's some guys that really dive into the tape have noted some of the inconsistencies of his play. I think there were times in the playoffs where maybe he missed a block in the passing game. He did tweet out that he had played 12 games this year, didn't give up a single sack. And if you go over to Pro Football Focus for whatever you think that's worth, he's the Bills' top-rated run blocker on the roster. That's a big deal for a team that wants to improve in the run game in 2021. Not necessarily run more, but run better. You want to keep the run blockers that are good around. And I think that part of the reason he's so good at that, he's a nasty kind of guy. He likes getting physical. It's especially on the interior, you kind of set the tone in the run game when you're able to kind of unload on players. We all know Jon Feliciano's MMA, passion for MMA. So I think that a couple contributing factors that go into this thing is, first of all, the moving around parts. I think that to go from guard, then to center, get comfortable there, and then have to go back to guard, and then he played there for the rest of the year. I think it's just a little bit of musical chairs. He played on the left side and the right side. And so I'm willing to bet that this deal looks a lot similar to a lot of other deals that Beane has made over the course of his time in Buffalo. It's probably one that you can get out of down the line if you need to, structured it probably properly. And he brings back at least a level of dependability that I think is so important when your team is literally built around the quarterback.
Yeah, and the one argument that drives me nuts is he struggled against the Chiefs. Guys, it was Chris Jones. Most players struggle against Chris Jones. Yeah. Most players struggle against guys like Aaron Donald. expecting them to shut those players out on a game-by-game basis is not going to happen. They're going to make plays. They're superstar defenders. They're guys on the inside that could be in the race for Defensive Player of the year in, year out. It happens. But you mentioned it. Jon Feliciano is arguably their best run blocker. They want to improve in that area. Getting rid of him does not help you improve in that area. He was fired up when they ran the ball. He's the one that was getting to that second level, clapping the hands, finishing those blocks. He came off of a serious injury. And I know a lot of players didn't have a true offseason last year with COVID and everything else, but I think he'll come back even better this year, as long as he's healthy. So I think it's a great move for $6 million, getting someone that can play guard and center. Hopefully you can settle him in at that guard position. Mitch Morse plays a full 16 games. You get Cody Ford at the other guard spot, and then he doesn't have to move, and then he can really focus on that one spot. But I don't know where the complaints would come from. You're getting this guy at a bargain. You're helping a team that made all the way to the AFC Championship. This is not a team that went 6-10 and brought back everyone back. This is a team that won 13 games in the regular season, made it all the way to the AFC Championship game, and then had a pretty bad game plan in that game. If they could go back and and change that, I'm sure they would. But let's not act like this was a bad team bringing back its key pieces. This was a great team, one of the NFL's best teams, and they brought back their top 3 free agents.
Yeah, and I know Bills fans loved during the season all of those videos that went viral on social media of the dance parties on the Bills practice field. And, a big reason why that happens is because of, of course, the culture that's been built by, the front office and the coaching staff, but also the, caliber of guys that are in that room. And anybody you talk to our earlier point would tell you that they love Jon Feliciano. He's a guy that really, I think is just, he's a guy that keeps things light. He's easy to talk to. He knows when to get serious. He knows when to have fun. And obviously there's other guys in this room that have made such an impact. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley. I mean, there's a lot of veteran kind of guys, but you want a guy like Jon Feliciano. I mean, everybody goes, Mitch Morse has that line where he says, if I was going into a bar fight, I'd bring Josh Allen with me. Well, I guarantee you, and Ariel Hawani was asking us this question when we were doing the podcast with him, when we were talking about who would be the fight, or we asked him who would be the fighters on this roster. And the first guy you talk about is Jon Feliciano. Everybody's taking Jon Feliciano into a bar fight with him. And I think that mentally speaking, that would have been a big loss to not have that presence there next year going into the season. It's always nice to have those kind of guys.
Yep. I mean, you're nailing it right on the head. Those are the guys that you want on this team, the guys that will fight for your quarterback, that when your quarterback takes a shot, he's going to be there, one, to help Josh get up, but then he's going to get in the guy's face as well. There's something to be said about that, having someone that sticks up for your teammates. It wasn't that long ago that a guy like Rob Gronkowski hurts Trey White, and what happens? Nothing. No one really gets in Gronk's face. No one really steps up for their team. That would not happen on this year's Bills team. And I'm using that one example. I'm not calling out Gronk or anything like that. But if something happens to a player, this team is going to step up. And a guy like Feliciano on the offense side of the ball is going to be the first person that's going to get in your face and let you know that you did something wrong.
Steve Rose asked, Beane talked up Cody Ford at the press conference. Perhaps he may try and trade him for a pick. Maybe Ford has a higher ceiling at guard and will improve, thinking they'll still draft a guard. Where are you at? Start us off there, Ryan. Where are you at with Cody Ford entering year 3? We've talked a little bit about this on some previous podcasts, but I mean, I'm not even anywhere close to kind of give up on that Cody Ford development project. I mean, we're year 3 and he's still yet to go into a season and play multiple games at the same position where he's the guy at that position for a whole game.
No, I just don't think, one, they're anywhere at that point with Cody Ford. And, Steve, to answer your question, what are you going to get back if you trade Cody Ford? You're not going to get back the second-round pick that you used to acquire him. You're talking probably a late day 3 pick because there's not a lot of tape on him. Someone's going to would trade for him because maybe they liked him coming out of college. But there's not enough film out there to say this guy could be elite. Now, the Bills, though, when they drafted him, they felt like he was going to be a good fit for this team, a good fit for this system. And Brandon Beane, I don't think he was just talking him up. I think they really feel that way about this guy. So they're going to give him every opportunity to win that left guard spot because I think Feliciano locks down the right guard spot. You obviously have Your other players now locked in as well. So I think he's played his best football at left guard when he's been on the field. Whether he's played at different spots, mind you. He can go into this season saying, I am locked in at left guard, which I think is huge for any player to know I don't have to worry about moving around. That's why the Bills were able to get Darrell Williams last year at such a reasonable rate. The guy was moved to 4 different spots in his last year in Carolina, struggled, which is to be expected, and the Bills were the beneficiary of that. Cody Ford can go into year 3 saying, I am focused on playing left guard. I am focused on getting through this year healthy as I can. But he can truly just kind of settle in and focus, knowing his absolute 100%. That is my role for 2021.
Look at this. Just a couple social media updates here. If you're listening to the podcast after the fact, sorry, you won't be able to see this. But Jon Feliciano tweeted out, "Do work, son. Bills Mafia 3 more years." A pretty entertaining picture, to be honest with you. A little Photoshop. Josh Allen has retweeted it, as has a few other players. And then I just saw Lee Smith had a tweet here. Let me see if I can bring that up. Basically saying, so glad to see Darrell Williams and Jon Feliciano back to protect Josh Allen. Some people having fun with it. And, I think this is it's a cool time for Bills fans, Ryan, because, there hasn't been many opportunities over the period of the drought and even going back to, 96, the last division title, where, a regime could draft a cycle of players, a 4-year cycle of players, and then start to bring them back and re-sign them and have them want to stay. First and foremost, these guys got to want to stay. And, after Levante David signed, Matt Milano elevated to arguably the top linebacker on the market. And who's to say? I know that, reports are out there that maybe the market wasn't as fruitful as maybe they initially thought. But then you go and talk to Matt Milano and you can hear in his voice, hearing him talk about, wanting to stay in Buffalo, finish what they started, that, Buffalo is his kind of city and all these kinds of things. And, the impact that it's obviously had on Darrell Williams. And we all know about the bond between Jon Feliciano and Bills Mafia. This is a really cool moment to be a Bills fan, because not only is the team successful on the field, but the success they're having off the field, I think, says a lot about the success of the build and the regime that's in place.
Yeah, re-signing your own players wanting to come back before even testing the market, having key players that were on the the cut line, so to speak. They could have been cut, but going to the Bills and taking the pay cut. Again, your Mitch Morse, which I don't think he would have been cut. I think he just went to the team and was willing to kind of play ball. Mario Addison, who definitely was at risk, in my opinion, of being cut. Vernon Butler. It says a lot about the culture. It says a lot about what the players feel about Buffalo, the team, the city, the chance to play for a championship in these next few years. So, this is an exciting time to be a Bills fan. The Bills Mafia should be thrilled, knowing that going into the legal tampering window starting tomorrow, your top 3 guys are locked down. There still could be some more returns, and you're still going to also fill in some key holes here in the second, third wave of free agency and in the draft, which, the Bills are picking pretty late each round, but you can still find some talented guys at the end of round 1, round 2, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and to your point, think back to Isaiah McKenzie when they got him off the Denver Broncos practice squad. Nobody was thinking that he was going to turn into a contributor that in a couple of years fans were going to cringe at the idea of losing in free agency. So it's always a cycle. There's players that they've brought in. I mean, somebody that kind of people have forgot about that. Obviously horns up, a big UB guy, but Cam Lewis in the mix that, you never know where he can maybe factor in if he's given a bigger opportunity. So there's a lot of things still to come in terms of how they're going to build this roster. I saw a good question here. And if anybody has any questions, comments, drop them in here. We'll go for a few more minutes. We had a really awesome episode recently where we brought the fans on to do kind of a caller episode. And Ryan, a lot of people loved it. We're getting requests now. Hey, next time you have a show, can I come on as a caller? So I think what we're going to do, maybe towards the end of next week, if we have a show, I don't know what the schedule is going to be next week because we're doing so many reaction pods. We might not have the traditional Wednesday show, but if we do, or if we move it back to Thursday or Friday, I think we're going to incorporate a lot more callers in that. So if you want to call, or come on the show and ask a question, hit me up on Twitter or email me, whichever way you're more familiar, at Matt Parrino or mparrino@nyup.com. And we'll get you in the mix here. But there was a good question here I wanted to bring up from Cam Greasy on YouTube. Does this signing change how you view the running back situation now that it looks like we'll have the same personnel on O-line?
That is a great question. I think they went into the end of last year saying that there were a lot of issues, and it went all the way around. It was offensive line. It was the running backs missing some holes and some assignments here and there. It was the fact that I felt that Devin Singletary was a little tentative at times, that Zach Moss maybe missed a lane that he was supposed to run through. But those are young backs. So Singletary wasn't that long ago. I've said he tied for the league lead in yards per carry. Zach Moss flashed at times. It doesn't change the way I feel about this personnel. I still think Antonio Williams has high upside. But as the Bills keep addressing these holes, these needs, and re-signing their own, it does open the door for our friend Marcel to get pretty excited about the possibility of Travis Etienne at number 30. A player like that is a playmaker. He's a game changer with the ball in his hands. It's not just a traditional back. So the more the Bills do in terms of signing their own, addressing these needs heading into the draft, the more likely it is that an Etienne could be the best player available at number 30, and the Bills could take a swing on someone like that and say, this is one of those missing playmakers that we didn't have in the AFC Championship game. Someone who obviously is dynamic with the ball in his hands as a runner, but also improves significantly as a receiver in his final 2 years at Clemson. Someone that Stephon Diggs really likes, as he compared him to Alvin Kamara. So, they could still address it, which then puts them in a difficult spot at bind, because some weeks your day 2 pick from either last year or 2 years ago could be inactive, depending on how things work out. But, they're not in the feelings business. They're in the football business, and they're going to do what's best for this team.
I was just looking at, because the running back situation or the polarization of the conversation, I think, is always so interesting, because I know fans want, you're looking at the offense and where can I plug in like a blue chip player? You got Josh Allen, you have Stephon Diggs on the outside, you have Cole Beasley in the slot, you have Deion Dawkins at left tackle. You have a lot of blue chippers right all over the place, big money guys. The next place you probably look is running back before you probably look at tight end, because you want a game changer, a playmaker. But what I think this week has done for the Bills is now it allows them to truly go into April and this draft, and as they've already been doing and preparing for the last couple of months, but truly go in and draft the best player available. I think that depending on who falls, if no running backs go before 30 and Travis Etienne is just absolutely standing out on your board and it offers that speed, that versatility, that, Swiss Army knife you could kind of do unbelievable amounts of things with, pull the trigger on it. I'm not against that. If you really think that that's going to be something that takes your offense to the next level, I never argue against that. What if a Gregory Rousseau, who I think most people were saying is the top edge rusher in this draft from Michigan, you're starting to see mock drafts all of a sudden flip, and his stock's kind of going down a little bit for whatever reason. I'm not sure. I don't think the Michigan Pro Day has happened yet. Probably skyrockets back up if you test well. But, those are the kinds of things we'll watch over the next 2 months. And I know Brandon Beane said it, and you could always, give it lip service, and it's cliche, but we have to draft well, and we have to draft, develop, and then we'll try to resign, and it's important. But this year more than ever, because of the lack of funds, like, you got to zero in and see who can I take maybe at 30 or wherever else in the draft you could take that's going to come in here and contribute right away. And I'd love to kind of drill in a little deeper with Brandon and talk to him more about Gabriel Davis and Dane Jackson, specifically about how much last year when he sent that name in virtually to the virtual podium, did he think that those guys were going to have the kind of year one impact that they did? And I know Dane Jackson who played a couple games, but when he was on the field, big time plays, takeaways as a CB2 are huge. A big play against the top receiver in the league like DeAndre Hopkins, those are huge plays. And so they need more of those kind of guys to kind of come in here and make a contribution in 2021.
Yeah, pick number 30, whoever it has to be on the field early and often for this team. You said it. Cap space is limited right now. We obviously don't know the specific details of Jon Feliciano's deal for this year and Darrell Williams, and then what cap space is left and what the Bills are still going to do. But they're not going to be able to address everything necessarily in free agency. So whoever comes in at number 30 has to play and play a lot to make that pick worthwhile. Players that you get on day 2 have to be instant contributors. So maybe that is where you get another edge rusher for your rotation, or a cornerback number 2, or running back. Wide receiver has been mentioned here in the chat a lot. Yeah, you know, if one of those premier wide receivers falls to number 30, which absolutely could happen, pull the trigger, especially if they have speed. A Tony, a Bateman, and I'm not saying either of those guys specifically would fall, but if they did, absolutely, if that's the best player available, that's the way Brandon Beane's going to go. But at pick 30, he also has to make sure that it's someone that's going to play. We've seen time and time again where he meets with the media and he says, yeah, this guy was standing out on our board pretty significantly. I mean, it happened last year later in the draft with Jake Fromm. They said he was well above our other guys on that board. That's why we took him when we did. They didn't necessarily need a backup quarterback or a potential backup quarterback at that point. But if someone stands out on their board, whether it's at the 1st round, 5th round, or 7th round, they're going to go and attack and get that guy.
Great stuff as always from Mr. Ryan Talbot. Some great stuff in the comments. Guys, this is just the beginning. We are going to probably come at you more than you probably even want over the course of the next week, because, you know, as this thing goes along, I also want to do maybe an AFC East show as we really start to move in. Maybe I'll reach out to some of our guys on the beats in Miami, New England, and New York, just to kind of get an update on what things are going like over there. And, you know, maybe that's another vantage point that I think Bills fans are going to take this week looking in free agency, is maybe not so much what the Bills are doing after some big moves here already, but what are some of the top competitors doing around the league. I think the big thing for me is, what are they going to put around Cam Newton in New England? Because if they land a Kenny Golladay, if they land a Jonnu Smith, then things become interesting there. And listen, I'm not sitting here saying that puts them above the Bills. Honestly, the only move that I think can happen this offseason that would put one of the 3 teams ahead of the Bills for me, potentially, and I still don't know if that would be the case. As a matter of fact, no, let me stop there. It wouldn't be the case. But the only one I would actually think about and consider is a Deshaun Watson trade to Miami or New England, I guess, or not New York. But you get my point. So I think going into next year, no matter what happens over the course of the next month and a half, the Bills are still the odds-on favorite to win the AFC East, especially coming off of what they did last year. But things will be interesting to see what kind of little parts are moved around or what big parts.
Yeah, 100%. You know, the Dolphins had a really good year, but we saw that they wasted a lot of money, but they could add a few key pieces that help them close the gap. The Jets are probably still a year or 2 away, but they have some money to play with. And you mentioned it already with the Patriots. Although I will say Cam Newton's deal, I believe like the base sale and everything else is kind of like a placeholder where if they find something better, they might not even have him on the roster. It looked good when you first heard 1 year, $14 million, like that's their guy, but it might not be. A lot of their defensive players are coming back that had opted out last season. So they're going to see a boost in terms of their overall talent. But like you said, the Bills are still the team to beat in this division, regardless of what happens, unless a blockbuster quarterback trade happens. And then things, I guess, could really get interesting here in Buffalo.
All right, for Ryan Talbot, I am Matt Parrino. Thank you so much for all your support this offseason. You guys have been awesome. We're growing this YouTube page like crazy, which is fun, and we're always live on Facebook and Twitter, and then on all the audio platforms right after. Find us on Apple. Give us a review if you would. That really helps us out as we try to grow the audio-only version of this. And then, as always, hit that subscribe button. Like this video. What's the lingo, Ryan? You say it better than me.
Like, subscribe, review,
smash that like button. There you go. Listen, this guy's still flying high from St. Bonaventure. Getting the dub. You got a championship T-shirt already?
This is just the regular season. I need the tourney though.
All right. Okay. Listen, my UB Bulls lost last night. Look at him flexing, puffing out his chest a little bit. All right. On that note, we're going to get out of here. Enjoy the rest of what's left of your weekend, and we will see you very soon. Enjoy free agency week, everyone.